Reconstruction Fund bill, and I have to say I am somewhat bewildered. I've been really looking forward to speak on this bill. This is one of those bills that I really had a good look at, and I've been really excited about talking about it because it's very much close to my heart. But I've been utterly bewildered because families and their businesses across the country are contending with the most challenging cost of living crisis in a generation. I'm bewildered that we're discussing this bill while Australians are crying out for the federal government to do something, anything, to help them get through this cost of living crisis. Inflation is at an historic high. Interest rates have climbed 10 times since, well, 9 times since Labor took office, but 10 out of the last 10 months, 9 under this government. The price of doing business is soaring with each piece of red tape this government slaps on small and family business owners. And the price of turning on the aircon, filling up the car with fuel, putting food on the table, just continues to grow and grow and grow. You'd think that instead of another bill throwing money at Labor union paymasters, they might consider introducing legislation to address the cost of living. But the only thing the Australian people care about right now is how this government is going to reduce their costs and how Australians are going to be paying their bills. Rent, school fees, mobile phone and internet. Australians are struggling to make ends meet. It seems that everything is going up in cost, and now for any Australian families there's a lot more month at the end of the money. And that disparity is growing. It's getting worse under this Labor government's policies, and Labor just don't seem to care. What should the bill do? This bill is Labor's signature manufacturing policy. It is what they are going out to the electorate and saying, this is the bee's knees. It's modelled on the Clean Energy Finance Corporation. The fund is designed to allow government to invest in initiatives which support their manufacturing priorities. These investments are not in grants. They are through government equity and loan schemes. This model means manufacturers may struggle to meet return on investment thresholds based on the government's arbitrary milestones. The federal government announced that the fund would be up and running by next financial year, but they refuse to commit to a launch date. Given their track record, not committing to a date is probably the safest option for them. However, last time they set up a fund like this, the Clean Energy Finance Corporation, it took 10 months before any money was invested. Across industry, there is widespread concern that the delay in investment, increased red tape and time taken to get the model running effectively will mean lost years in manufacturing. It means that private and personal investments might dry up. Anyone that started a business, and I know I probably shouldn't be looking over the other side when I say that, but anyone that has started a business would know that dithering and delays such as these mean the difference between survival and closing up shop. And what we are seeing across this country, more and more as the cost of living really bites on small and medium-sized businesses, is unfortunately more and more businesses closing, particularly in the building industry where I come from. What does this bill actually do? Well, it opens the door to unions yet again. I am gravely concerned about the potential for union interference in this fund. We already know what the unions want. They want board positions, they want power, they want money. And those opposite can laugh. They can laugh at that. An enterprise agreement with they want an enterprise agreement with unions as a precondition to any application. And isn't it funny how, as soon as a member of the coalition mentions that word unions, they arc up on the other side. Isn't that funny? They want a requirement that applicants, under this scheme, The government wants a requirement that applicants commit to direct employment, or at least direct employment conditions. And yet the Prime Minister still hasn't ruled out mandating union board members and union agreements as a condition of entry into the fund. He could easily do that. He could just rule it out and say, no, that's not what we're after. This is mandated unionism enshrined in law for Australian manufacturers who just want the backing of their government. Compulsory unionism for start-ups and small businesses will rob them of their unique selling points, their ability to innovate, their agility, their capacity to pivot as the market and as technology requires it. Far from the objects and purposes of this Act, it will have a crippling impact on manufacturing. Now, when we were in government, we outlined 6 core manufacturing priorities after significant consultation with industry, academia and across levels of government. These 6 areas were food and beverage, medical products, clean energy, critical minerals and resources, defence manufacturing and space industry. We invested $1.5 billion into the landmark modern manufacturing strategy to cultivate manufacturing sectors in these 6 priority areas. I've taken a personal interest in the defence manufacturing priority area as part of my commitment to back small businesses and local manufacturers on the Sunshine Coast. I think of the $47.4 million that the previous federal government invested to enable AnyQuest manufacturing generators for the ADF's protected mobility vehicles like the Bushmasters, which are now being seen and used in active combat in Ukraine. I think of the Sunshine Coast share of the $103 million advanced defence aerospace manufacturing network with firms like Helimods delivering the MQ-28A Ghostbat, the first combat aircraft to be built in Australia in over 50 years, which I had the privilege of again seeing at Avalon just last week. Indeed, good old Will Shrapnel indeed. I was incredibly disappointed to see the Defence Minister recently call into question the AUKUS alliance as if it were under threat if we didn't support his bill. Conflating our opposition to bad policy with a reversal of our long-held support of the AUKUS alliance and defence sector is utterly despicable. AUKUS would not have happened but for the former Prime Minister and the previous Defence Minister, Linda Reynolds, and also the current opposition leader. It is absolutely shameful for this now Labor government to suggest that we are somehow not locked in with AUKUS. It's also very disrespectful considering the work that we did to get it up. Our defence and national security are not bargaining chips for Labor to gamble on its latest whim or novel policy. AUKUS is about our defence, security and our economic strength. It was the coalition government that co-designed the alliance with our UK and US allies. Now, Labor continue to ride on the coattails of our defence achievements, but AUKUS should be above politics. The government should be embarrassed by this appalling and desperate attempt to pass their flawed bill. Despite Labor's reckless politicisation of our defence and national security, our record unequivocally demonstrates the Coalition's commitment to sovereign defence industry manufacturing. The Coalition government's $270 billion decade-long sovereign capability program proves it. The very existence of the AUKUS alliance is proof once again of this commitment. That's also why we put space industry at the core of our modern manufacturing strategy. Australia should be at the forefront of science and advanced manufacturing. That's why we established the Australian Space Agency. Having a cutting-edge space industry is not just a matter of national pride. It's imperative that we operate in space for the defence of our nation. Space and cyber are domains in which we must be ahead of the game. Protecting Australia's interests in space means maintaining the security of our communications, financial, navigation and signals capabilities. Space affects almost every aspect of everyone's life in Australia. Many Australians would not even recognise the importance of this, and apparently neither does this federal Labor government. While our competitors and our allies are investing heavily in the sector, Labor are ripping out incentives. Just think about this, Mr Deputy Speaker. The US Space Force in less than 5 years has amassed 16,000 military and civilian personnel with an operational budget of $24.5 billion. In contrast, the Australian Navy, now in its 122nd year, has 15,200 personnel. The RAF, in which our Defence Space Command sits, is just 14,500 personnel. That's the entire RAF. We have a very, very long way to go, and we must. The Defence Space Command motto says it well. Space really is the ultimate high ground. When in government, we did just that, investing in research, manufacturing, exports and missions. Labor appears to be dismantling our progress at every turn, and both industry and the community deserve to know why. The 7 key priority areas that Labor are talking about, they have just very silently dropped space off it. Nothing to see here. And it absolutely beggars belief that this government would drop off in an increasingly contested environment, the most contested and geopolitically unstable period since the end of World War II, where space and cyber are going to be critical domains should conflict come our way. And yet, under this fund that the government is putting together, this Reconstruction fund, they are not investing in space. It beggars belief. Now, in rushing this bill through, the Albanese government wants to offer $15 billion in taxpayer funds to a board picked by Labor to fund priorities set by Labor. They are leaving the task of determining manufacturing priorities to the minister. The potential for misuse is enormous, and I needn't remind the House how out of whack Labor's priorities are. Instead of addressing energy security, they're funding climate warrior training programs. Instead of mental health support, they're spending $400 million a year of borrowed taxpayers' money on a housing policy experiment that may not result in the construction of one home. Borders are opening and the Navy is on alert. Regional GPs are closing. Businesses are shutting up shop. The construction sector is teetering on the edge of collapse. Mobile towers are going up across Labor-held seats, while regional Australia languishes once again at the hand of Labor's neglect. And those opposite have the gall to talk about integrity and transparency. We know where Labor's priorities lie, and we know what Labor do. It's kind of like a reverse Robin Hood. They rob hard-working families and their businesses to pay for union elites. They promise to fix the problem, but they want Australian taxpayers to foot the bill. Labor promises the world, but then they give you an atlas. Why do Australians always pay more under Labor? I remind the government that they are just that. They are the government now. They are not an opposition in exile. They are not playing with union funds on the campaign trail. They are tasked with investing taxpayers' money to provide for them the best return. That means investing in priority economic areas which are clearly defined and based on reality, not political whims. It means investing those funds with value for money and long-term success in mind. It means protecting funds from special interest groups, including political donor bodies such as the trade unions to which they are so beholden. It means keeping national security and defence beyond day-to-day politics. It's time for Labor to get up, grow up and show up for the Australian people. No more politics, no more smoke and mirrors. It's time for real action and real outcomes for Australian families and their businesses.